Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have with us Dave Schoof. He's an ICF Master Certified Coach, international leadership consultant, over 25 years experience working with Fortune 500 executives across multiple sectors global. He's also a former counterintelligence officer, and so we'll learn from him about his pivot methodology, a consciousness informed framework for developing anti-fragile resistance, and imaginal intelligence. We'll learn about that to thrive in uncertainty. Welcome to the show, Dave.
It's very good to be here. It's nice to see you.
You're welcome. Welcome to the show, Dave. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about how one can navigate the modern meta crisis. We'll talk about all this. But before that, let's learn a bit about your journey, your background, so that people know who they are listening to.
Sure. So I'm based outside of Lausanne, Switzerland, and I work globally. I've been working as a leadership coach and an expert in human development for a long time. If I had hair, it would be white. So more than 30 years. Prior to that, I had a career in national security. And my coaching practice started to evolve and shift in a significant way during the pandemic. So what I noticed is my clients who would be possibly corporate leaders, NGO leaders, founders, also other coaches, and consciousness explorers, people invested in their self-development, were all kind of hitting walls, not just because of the pandemic, but since then, how to make sense of the world, how to navigate it, either in their personal or professional lives. So a short while ago, I shifted my practice. I call it the pivot, because we can no longer rely just on our best practices, what we've learned, how we've navigated, because the maps have changed. So I focus much more on personal and professional transformation, how to build capacity, how to make sense, how to navigate, how to stay grounded, how to be effective, and frankly, even thrive. Because I may be unique, but I'm an optimist. These times that we're in are very uncertain and tumultuous, but I see it as a transition time. In fact, I'm already excited at some of the emergent possibilities that are happening.
Absolutely, Dave. Absolutely. So let's take this into, in two ways. One is about the leadership and one is about the meta crisis.
Yeah,
So first about
yeah.
the leadership itself.
Mm.
Why are leaders so worried? Who are these leaders so worried? Because a lot of the problems that have been created are also from these very leaders itself. So help us understand in
Yes.
that backdrop, what is it that they want to fix that they themselves broke?
Yeah, it's a fascinating question, right? There's a lot of layers to this, and I can even bring up my own experience. I remember I and my colleagues, we go out to happy hour, have beers, and we would promise each other we would never do what our bosses were doing, right? And then we would get promoted and we would start doing exactly the same thing. So what is it in the system? What are the invisible forces at play? And that led me to, a study of systems theory and eventually into coaching. I think to get to your question, we're always trying to do our best. We're trying, leaders became leaders because they can think fast. They're somewhat accomplished in their fields of expertise, but that's a different set of muscles than leading people, than orchestrating, than inspiring. So when things go crazy, unexpected, the market shifts or supply chains freeze up, we go into problem solving. And where do we go for problem solving? We go to the past experiences. So that's where the double dilemma is. Leaders are kind of defaulting back to problem solving, but in outdated ways. So how do you shift? How do you become more agile? How do you flex and adapt and also allow for emergence of new possibilities?
Absolutely. So when you talk of being agile, You have got the biggest
Hmm.
opportunity with the artificial intelligence. What else do you want? I think their problems will. What do you say of that, Dave?
That's a whole nother show. That's a big deal. Yeah, I mean, this is part of the meta crisis, right? We've got layers of very, very fast change. I mean, if you look at just the development of AI just in the past 6 months, much less year, how do you grapple with that? How do you bring that into your companies? Companies are already discovering that the heavy investment that they made early on isn't paying off. Now, what do they do? So this is part of the meta crisis. The traditional way of grabbing onto something, implementing it, using it, blanketing it out through the world is not going to work. We have a higher level of interdependency than ever before. The globalization of our work. So all you have to do is look at just in the past few weeks, the internet outages that we've had, the shutdowns that have occurred and how they can paralyze entire systems. So there's a level of volatility and fragility that requires a different kind of leadership.
Absolutely. So let's bring in the meta crisis here now. What is this modern meta crisis that you talk about?
Yeah, people call it different things. They call it the poly crisis, which may be more accurate because it's multiple levels. It's everything from the emergence of AI, the change of the nature of work post-pandemic, the climate change, geopolitical fractions and splintering in ways that we haven't seen in a long time. So, any one of those would have been huge, but to pile all of them on, um, still the afterglow of the pandemic, potential future pandemics. So there's a period of uncertainty, and some people think of it as the end of times, or go very much into a kind of a doom and gloom scenario, which is understandable. And I'm not saying that this is a done deal. We can still mess up. But any change in history, in human history, has had periods of tumultuous disintegration of old systems. I just think that they're multi-layered right now. So there's a complexity that we're not really well equipped to navigate. So it calls for some new skills.
Absolutely. So, what is it that in the backdrop of leadership
Mm.
crisis, in the backdrop of meta crisis, what is it that you are trying to tell uh, the world, or to anyone, whoever is your target audience, Dave, here?
Yeah, whether it's a corporate leader or, someone who's just trying to become more of themselves and their own human development. I think, how do you do that kind of transformation work inside a meta crisis? And first of all, it requires I call it a pivot, a shift where we're not just relying on what we've done in the past. So how do we allow for the new, the emergent, the creativity? A lot of that is inner work. So when I work with a client, we'll start with foundations. You know, anything from mindfulness practices, somatic experiencing, whatever gets you, in touch with your inner intelligence. And then we need to work on relational space. So often, especially at the speed of our lives these days, our relationships have been reduced to transactional elements. There's a lot of information, intelligence even, that comes through the relational space. Like you and I'm in Switzerland, you're in India, yet there's a connection. So what's going on for you? Can I sense that, or at least hypothesize your mood? What's going on for you? And then what's going on in the space between us? And all of this is being received through my body, energetically, physically, emotionally. So paying attention to all of those is a huge upgrade, if you will, in our capacity to navigate. And in our world, and especially in the leadership world, we're moving so fast that a lot of these things are pushed aside, and we default to old ways. We stay in our head. We go very cognitive, for example.
Absolutely. So why are leaders struggling to get the answers? Why are they not going to the, and that is where I bring the third most important, but the most important is the people itself. Why is
Yes.
it that they are not looking at people and learning from them? How are people absorbing all the mistakes and the good parts that leadership is trying to do or have done, and still are being happy in every part of the world, and are still very hopeful in spite of having much less than the combined leadership of a few, FANG companies or leadership and all. And they look to be very much thinking about the world, which is not very much digestible. So why is it that they only forget about, think about themselves,
Mm.
never bring people into the equation, and then they remember the people only when everything is gone, and then they think, okay, let's find meaning in our lives, let's go back to the same people whom we discarded and were always running behind our bank accounts. Help us understand from where the leader should learn from, Dave.
Yeah, I appreciate your perspective and I understand where it comes from. I think I'm really fortunate because as I get to know leaders and people that are trying to be leaders in their lives, by the way, not just corporate leaders, they actually do care. They care deeply. They're doing what they think they know how to do best for that. Some leaders do default to the doing, the managing, they forget the relationships. Absolutely. I'm very busy as a coach in that world. But I see a lot of leaders deeply, they're walking the floors at 3 a.m. They're worried. They're concerned about their people. When they go to the people are even more terrified. They're in gridlock. They're paralyzed. They don't know what to do. So there's kind of a collective, almost a cultural looking back to what did we do before that worked? And then when it doesn't work, there's kind of a panic, right? And then we default, we do it even more. It's like if I go to a country where I don't understand the language, what do? I speak in English even louder. And that's what we do. We just go louder and louder and louder. So I think the role of leadership, there's a misunderstanding that if I'm a leader, I'm supposed to have all the answers. I'm always supposed to look like I'm calm under pressure and I can instill, everything's fine. We need more vulnerability. We need more imaginal space in our leaders, the creative space, the space for something new to emerge. That's a different kind of dialogue with their people, saying, I don't know where we're going, but I'm here with you. We're going to do this together.
Absolutely. So let's understand your, pivot capability that you talk about. It also talks about, in your own words, the essential leadership skill for thriving amid rapid change while maintaining meaning and effectiveness. Now, what
Yes.
is this meaning? Help us understand. Don't these leaders understand the meaning, which is also in the vision of every company, that it has to be for the people, can be for profit, but ultimately it comes down to solving the pain, the problems of the people. Why is it that they forget this part and always try to look only at the bottom line and again only at the bank accounts? What is this meaning? How are you able to
Yeah.
put this string or drill into their heads about the meaning part when they themselves are in crisis and have never tried to understood this part? A lot of people, these people lie, Dave. They always talk about big, they always think to be talking about solving the problems of the world, but when it comes to the real problems, you see them running faster than chicken.
Wow. Yeah, well, this meaning thing, this is a big deal because there's actually a longing for meaning in all of us. Leaders are no different. In fact, I'd say the pain level's even higher because when you go to the top of an organization, it's pretty lonely up there. I find that in the C-suite, C-level, CEOs, that's lonely. That's different than being inside the organization, right? And they often will put aside their own personal development in, trying to do the work. And, what I keep finding over and over again is it's returning to the individual, returning to the values, the longing for meaning. And what I mean by meaning is, making a difference. This isn't just about profitability. In fact, I've never met a true leader that was in it for the money. Never. So they're really inspired to make a difference in the world, and that's what gives them meaning. So this isn't, a plaque or a frame on the wall of an organization that espouses values. That has some value, but are you walking your talk? And are you at that 3 a.m. when you're by yourself? What sustains you? What holds you? What's your navigation system? So, meaning and values, creating a GPS for leaders is one of the critical aspects of this. And they shift, right? As we grow and evolve, our values change. There are some fundamental ones that stay the same, but also the complexity of life, the maturing that comes, the wisdom. Things aren't as black and white. So, how do you navigate that?
Absolutely. I understand there are many, many, good leaders. A large percentage is very good leaders. So does it mean that while you are in leadership position, that position does not allow you to find meaning as well as,
Hmm,
meaning for yourself, meaning for public, and meaning for the company also at the same time? Is it because that
good
you have to
question.
wait till retirement and then realize the meaning in your life, when people will think it's
Yeah,
all, all BS? Even if you are true, people will
right.
not believe it.
You don't want to be on your deathbed figuring this out. You're absolutely right. No, I think the fact that, leaders are no different than anyone else. And we all have a tendency to move past, we don't spend time on these reflections and practices. We jump into the doing. We see the cultural approved path for success and we jump right into it. I go to college, I get married, I have kids, I have a career. But you know what? All that has been changing. So the path isn't clear anymore. So I think we're all in this together. There's a quote by Ram Dass that really serves as my operating system, and that is we're all just trying to help each other come home. And that's really the motivation. And that there's an intimacy in my coaching that, when we get to that level of conversation, it's quite special. We connect on that longing that is amongst all of us.
Absolutely. So, Dave, is your work, very easy or very difficult in these times? Because these leaders
Hmm.
are brilliant people. They have achieved a lot. But what they have achieved not is, perhaps the meaning and other things. If they
Yeah.
come to you, what is it that they come to you for generally, Dave? And how are you able to help them if they have not been able
Yeah.
to help themselves, because they lead so many thousands of people and still they need your help?
I think that's why I like working with leaders. There's a humility at some point that comes in. You're kind of brought to your knees. Like, I can't figure this one out. When I'm young and I'm in my 30s, I'm in my 40s, I'm driving, I'm proving myself, I'm climbing the ladder. But, with seasoning, age, maturity, and experience, there comes a time where the leader realizes their strong muscles don't work anymore. That's not enough. They've got to harness people, as to your point. And there's a point of suffering and humility that I find is the sweet spot to come in as a coach. So they're usually seeking me out, sometimes for very practical reasons, how to handle fragmentation, how to have better gravitas, kind of how to be a better leader. But usually what's underneath that is more of the existential questions around meaning. Why am I doing this? How can I be better? I'm losing connection not only with my family, but myself. How do I regain that? So those pain points are usually what are bringing people in. Now, it's true that many leaders are leaders because of their talents, their capabilities, and their cognitive horsepower. So they have a tendency to be very strong from the shoulders up, right? So waking up the somatic intelligence, waking up the emotional intelligence, waking up the relational intelligence is, a lot of what my work is. Do I find it hard? No, I find it beautiful work. I feel very privileged. I love it. I have a front row seat to some amazing people doing amazing things, not just in the corporate world, but in their lives. People that are trying to be the best father and mother they can while navigating the complexity of life. Nothing that gives me greater pleasure than supporting people like that.
Absolutely. And you also bring in imaginal intelligence. What is that? Help
Yes.
us understand that.
Yeah. That's pretty strange sound, isn't it? Yeah, we're so good with the rational. All of us have been schooled. We've now I can go into education. Some of the meta crisis, we've lost our critical thinking capabilities, but we tend to over-index on the rational. I would even propose some of what's contributed to the meta crisis is being over-rational. There's not enough around imagination. There's not enough around creativity. So that constantly going back to what's been tried and true in the past, that's not so imaginative. And it doesn't fit with the fast changing landscape that we're in. So it calls for being creative. It also calls for giving space for something to emerge. So if you're a leader, how do I give space for my people and my team for creative energies to emerge with something new? If I'm a working father and I'm trying to raise my kids in this crazy, crazy world, how do I not default to what my dad did with me? How do I allow emergent of a new way of parenting? So
Absolutely.
that's the imaginal. That's bringing in the imagination. We need more imagination and imaginal muscles because we're way too rational.
Absolutely. But is it possible? But you answered this as part of this question that is coming, is that when you talk of the meta crisis, is the meta crisis yet to come? How far we are from it? Are we undergoing a meta crisis? When will this end? And what does the post meta crisis look like? And
Yeah,
who will
great.
survive?
Can we do a whole show? So the meta, I don't. If I knew the end of the meta crisis, I'd be a very wealthy man. Are we in it? We sure are. We're up to our elbows in it. Can it get more complex? Probably. We're in a transition period where old ways are crumbling and breaking down. But I'm already seeing exciting signs of new ways. My advice to your audience is, be careful of your echo chambers. Bring in some of the edge thinkers, the people, the futurists, the people that are already doing things, new ways of living together, community building, new ways of education reform. There's a lot happening that's already emergent. Just in dealing with one layer like the climate crisis, what's going on in Spain around reconfiguring, what's going on in your country. India is one of the leaders in tackling this, so this is the emergent, this is the new. So this is why it's why it's so important to, bring this in because not everything is doom and gloom. It's messy. It's hard. We could still not make it. That's always been a possibility. But I'm super optimistic, especially when I look at the youth. The level of consciousness in the youth today is extraordinary. I'm awed. I was in a retreat in the Black Forest and I had 20 and 30-year-olds mixed in with people my age. And their level of awareness and consciousness, boy, if I had that at that age. So I'm hopeful.
Absolutely. And when you are hopeful and when you talk of consciousness, you also talk of conscious, informed leadership. Means how what do you want leadership? People talk heart-shaped leadership, servant leadership, empathetic leadership, and whatnot, and now conscious, inness informed leadership. What is it about consciousness? I mean, should
Yeah.
they go back to the jungles and learn from there and come back into the mainstream?
Absolutely. Actually, I would say conscious leader is all of those things. So if I can be aware of what's needed, can I create followership? Can I tune in? Am I aware of what's going on inside me, my own internal dialogues? Can I be curious what's going on inside you and take the time and find out? Slowing down to speed up. The value of, the moment, the breath, recharge. All of those are elements of conscious leadership. So raising consciousness, raising awareness. And I would even say, back to your earlier point on Imaginal, is expanded consciousness. Like, how do you actually leverage the different conscious states that you can move in? That's very powerful.
Absolutely. So the present generation of leadership, do you think they will survive till the end of the meta crisis, or do you think they will all get subsumed in this whole process, and at the end it will be a new sort of leadership which will not need to learn about things, which will be born with those qualities, like we were born with empathy, but forgot midway.
That would be awesome. That would be really cool if there was a whole reset, right, for humanity. I don't know. Uh, I think it could go either one of those scenarios is entirely plausible. I think the key is to focus on what do we have now and what do we need to do now and build that capacity. I think there's something about momentum. My intuition tells me there's so much going on in the world, around raising consciousness, for example, around bringing in the imaginal. There's all kinds of things going on that just didn't even exist 15, 20 years ago. So I think the center of gravity, if you will, of human development, whether you follow an evolutionary model or a spiritual model, I think it is accelerating, going back to, the young generations that are coming in with that capacity. So I'm not sure that, trying to find the answer to your question is all that important with either scenario being possible.
Absolutely. So let's look at it this way. You talk about, navigating the meta crisis and emerging future with wisdom, grace, and anti-fragile resilience. Now, wisdom,
Mm.
even the saints were very wise and they lived their life nicely. Do you have to go and find wisdom somewhere else? Where do they find this wisdom which you
Yeah,
talk about, or is it something else? Grace,
I like
part
that
of human
question.
existence. Have they forgotten it? Why did they forget it? Who is to be blamed? Where do they get it back, and how do they get it back? Can it be bought on Amazon or anywhere else? Do tell.
That
And
would be outstanding.
and about
I'll
anti-fragile resilience.
yeah,
How do you
yeah.
have
So
maintain that all these things?
sure. Well, let me go backwards. So anti-fragility is starting to build practices, building a good platform that allows that. I think, how I would answer this, I think, is it's my stance that there's nothing wrong. Like if I'm working with you, it's not that you're broken and you need to be fixed. That's a major mindset that's problematic for a lot of reasons. Instead, can I hold the space for your unfolding? There's a famous quote by Michelangelo that the statue of David was already in the marble, and his job was to chip away the excess marble, the not needed marble. And that's how I view this. I think it's, we forget. If you go back in time and look at indigenous people, look back in history, there was a sensitivity, a consciousness, a connectivity that we think is almost magical. That was just part of the day to day living, but we've forgotten it or we've been blocked by it. So I think my work with leaders or with anyone is really, helping them remember who they are, help them come home to themselves, chip away those unneeded pieces of marble. It really is a remembering.
Absolutely, absolutely. There is so much to learn about all this from you, and I'm sure a lot of leaders, a lot of people would want to understand more from you about all this, and perhaps also be your client. What is the best way for them to do so?
Sure. I have a website that has all kinds of information, ways to connect through podcasts, newsletters, etc., schedule calls, and it's my name, so it's daveschoaf.com. You'll see the name of the pivot, which is the name of the work that I do.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
It was a real pleasure.